So we just learned about arrays in JavaScript, which is a so-called data structure. But now it's time to talk about another data structure in JavaScript, which are objects. And objects are quite similar to arrays because just like arrays, they allow us to aggregate different values into just one big value. So that's what we did with the array here, where we had these three values and we aggregated them into one array. However, in an array, each of the values doesn't really have a name or a designation. They are simply ordered one after another in the array. But in an object, that's different. In an object, we can give each of the object elements a name. So let me show you how that works. And so let's now create a fact object. So previously, we had an array to store the data about a fact, but actually, an object is a way better data structure to store information like that, because again, we can give each of the values a name. So in order to write an object, we use curly braces, and then we can simply start by defining the name and then the value. So here we have the string, and that's it. So we have an object now with this so-called key value pair. So this is the key and this is the value. We also say that this is a property of the fact object, so to say. So to take a look at that property, we can log to the console fact object and then dot text. So here we have that dot again that we have already seen a couple of times before. And so indeed we get Lisbon is the capital of Portugal. All right. Now there is actually a second way of doing this. So of retrieving something from an object. So fact object. So just like before with the array, we can use the square brackets and then we can pass in a string with the name of the property. So that's text, and then here we go. It just needs to be a string, not just text as we have here. But usually we rarely do this unless we have to compute this string from something else. So usually we use dot text. But let's add some more properties here to our object. So we can use the category, which is society. We can use created in 2015 and basically adding the same information that we had before previously in the array, but now actually naming each of these pieces of data. So let's call this one is correct and true. So now we know how to create an object and we already know how to retrieve objects from there. Okay, and now let's see how we can create variables from the object using destructuring. So exactly what we had here in the array. So we have something similar for objects as well. And here we use the curly braces. And now we need to simply use the exact same names as we have in the properties. So for example, we can create category and we can create is correct from fact object. And so it will then go to the object here and it will retrieve these two properties and it will store them in these two variables. So again, we are creating multiple variables here at the same time and we are giving them the exact same names as the property names. And just to check out if that works, let's see the category. And indeed, we get society. Just like with arrays, we really do this all the time when working with data in JavaScript. So objects and arrays are the most used data structures that we use all the time, really, when working with JavaScript. Now, something that objects have that arrays do not is something called methods. So let me basically add a new property here, or at least what looks like a property. Let's call this one create summary. And now the value here is going to be a function. So function, and let's return a template literal. So here in this function, we will return basically a string, and we will assemble that string from some information that is in the object itself. So we can write the fact, and now here we can reference this object itself by writing this. So this means this current object, and then dot text. And this is a little bit confusing here, and actually for most beginners, the this keyword is a source of great confusion. But actually we don't really need it a lot in modern JavaScript. So don't worry about this. This is just so I can create some meaningful example here. So a meaningful method. So again, writing this dot text is basically very similar to writing a fact object dot text. Okay, so the this keyword here is simply a special keyword in JavaScript that points, so that is basically equal to the current object. So the object that this method here will later be called on. Okay, but it will make a little bit more sense once we see the result of this. So is from the category, and let's do another one here, this dot category, and why not convert it to uppercase. So to uppercase, and we need to call this because to uppercase is a function. Okay, give it a save. And now for the first time, we are going to call our own method. So we can see it in the console. We do console.log and then fact object dot create summary. So this is basically just like we read any other property, so text, but this is of course a special property because it's a function, and therefore it's called a method, and so we need to call it using parentheses. So every single function, no matter if it's a function or a method, needs to be called using parentheses. And in this case, we don't need any argument. So you see this function does not accept any arguments. It simply takes the data right from its object and returns this string. So based on its own data, basically. So I'll give it a save. And indeed, the fact, let's add some quotes here. So the fact Lisbon is the capital of Portugal is from the category society. Great. And so with this, we have unveiled a bit of the mystery of what this dot something here is. So we have used it many times before already. So here we had the string, we called dot uppercase on it, and it then simply did something with the data and returned it. And we never really understood what that was. And now we know that it is simply a method. Or we did it with arrays. Or actually, no, we didn't yet. Yeah, we will do that later. But yeah, up here, right in the very first lecture, here we have, for example, this method dot contains. And so this is just like the methods that we have just written. So basically this class list here, it has some methods that can be called. And so here we call that by dot contains. Now the way all that works internally is actually quite complicated. And if you want to learn all about that, you can of course take my complete JavaScript course. But for this crash course, there's no need for that. The most important thing that you need to know about objects for now is basically what they are, how we can create them, what a method is, and how we can destructure them into their own new variables. So those are the fundamental things. And I think with this video, you will now know how to do all that.